Hey, how you doing? It's Clayton here from howtodrawcomics.net and the How to Draw Comics Academy. And welcome to our 111th feedback and critique session. We're doing it live here today across the howtodrawcomics.net and also the Academy Network. And hopefully we'll be able to show everybody out there some of the amazing work that the members of the How to Draw Comics Academy have been doing, as well as also give you some insights into exactly how not only they can take their work to the next level, but also your own. Because no matter who we are or what level we are at as artists, it's very likely that we're coming up against the same challenges. I know I've been drawing for must be 20 years now. Probably more than that, honestly. And still, I have trouble with perspective. I still fail at proportions sometimes. My anatomy comes out wonky when I'm not paying enough attention. And you know what the worst part is? Is that unless there's someone else there to look over my shoulder, I'm blind to it. That's the thing about being an artist, is that oftentimes we fall into tunnel vision. We just don't see where we're messing up. And yes, we can go away from the drawing board for a little while and take a little break, come back with a fresh perspective. That's always useful. Maybe even leave it a day or two. And that can obviously be something that helps you to see where you might be going wrong. But when you've got somebody else there, especially somebody with experience, to give you that second opinion, to help you just figure out how you could not necessarily fix your mistakes, but enhance what you've already got, man, that can be just, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And from that moment forth, whenever you put pencil to paper, it's like you're this upgraded version of who you were before as an artist. So that's what I'm hoping to give everybody here in the How to Draw Comics Academy who have submitted their work for feedback tonight. But also, if you're coming up against the same problems within your art, hopefully you'll be able to figure out how to attend to those as I work my way through the bumps in the road that we're going to be observing within the work we'll be presenting tonight. A big hello to Acadian Comics, who's in the chat right now. James Fondren, we're going to be taking a look at his work tonight. We've also got Matt Nicola. What's up, Matt? I hope that you're doing good. And we've got Chris. What's up, Chris? Great to see you here. All right, well, without further ado, I say that we jump straight into this and get started. All right, so first up, we're taking a look at Giovanni's work. Now, Giovanni, one of the prominent members of the How to Draw Comics Academy, he has been cracking away on this werewolf comic for a good long while. Probably, I would say, 6 to 12 months, actually. And he got it done. He got the full comic done. Or maybe it was like an ash can. I know that he printed it and that you can actually order it on his website, which is pretty darn cool. So huge achievement that Giovanni has accomplished there. And he submitted this piece for feedback, and as you can see, it's pretty damn epic. Now, what's special about what we're looking at here is I think this is one of the first times that Giovanni has ventured into traditional inking. I don't know if it's his first time, but I know that he was talking about it and that he wanted to give it a shot or another shot. And to be honest, looking at it, I think that he's done a very fine job right here. I mean, I don't think I could ink that well traditionally, if I'm going to be honest with you. In terms of the werewolf's pose and the storytelling that we're seeing here, all of it looks great. You know, it's a good composition with the big moon here behind the werewolf framing him. This is a classic Frank Frazetta setup in terms of composition. I'm sure that Giovanni must have been inspired actually by Frank Frazetta for this one. But let's take a look. You know what I like to do? I like to zoom out a little bit and start with the fundamentals. Even though this piece is done and Giovanni has completed it, there's still a lot we can learn here that he can take away with him for next time when he decides to jump into another piece. So we're going to drop the opacity here. Turn this to blue. Well, actually that makes it a little hard to see. So let's just pretend like we've gone over it with a kneaded eraser, and we're going to take a look at the penciled version. All right. Make a brand new layer up the top there. Get out my red marker pen. Okay, so well, let's make this black actually. Just lighten it up a tiny bit more. Hopefully you can all still see it. But the werewolf's pose, so you can see that this, you know, he's got the werewolf and it's coming forward. This is a good thing. We want to see that. All right, it's not just standing straight up and down. We can see that the torso there is actually coming toward us. More than that, you can see that it's on a bit of an angle. And that makes it feel a whole lot more natural. It also gives somewhat of a twist, a bend to the body that shows, all right, this figure is in motion. It's alive. For anyone out there who's ever had to contend with stiff-looking characters that look like robots, like they've got no energy in them, no life, this is how you avoid that happening, is by incorporating a bend, a twist, especially along the torso, with opposing tilts in the shoulders and the hips. It's going to instantly make your characters look like they're alive. And you can also even add another tilt to the head in the opposite direction. So, for example, we have the body pointed in this direction. You know, you'd ideally want the pelvis pointed in the opposite direction, which I think it is in Giovanni's case. And then he's got the head. You'll notice the head is pointed in the opposite direction to the chest. Once more, we've got that movement happening in there. And this is not really a critique on Giovanni's work. It's more of an observation that we can make about something that he's doing right. Because knowing what's good about the work that you're creating, what's actually working within it, is also just as valuable as knowing what's not working. Okay, so then he's got this leg coming forward. That's good. He's got, and you'll also notice this, right? So he's got the leg coming forward on this side. Everybody should be paying attention to this if you're watching. He's got this leg coming forward, and the opposite leg, it's going back in space. But then he has the arm on the opposite side of the body to this one, this leg, which is coming forward. So you can see there that we've got these opposing sections of the body on either side. Some that are coming back, some that are coming forwards. If the left leg is coming forward, then the right leg is going back, but the right arm is coming forward, and the left arm is going back. If that makes any sense at all. I mean, you can see it right here. It just creates this massive amount of dynamism. And what does that mean? It means that this arm on the left-hand side of the body, as we're looking at it, is going to be pushed back. All right. So that's how you create a figure that has an absolute ton of movement within it. Beautiful work, Giovanni. You've been paying attention during class. It's good to see. So the werewolf is fantastic. The background is glorious. I think that the weakest part of this illustration is probably the guy in front, and I believe this is Giovanni. So, is it true, Giovanni? It kind of looks like you, I feel like. So, what's going on here? Well, we've still got a ton of interesting dynamic movement within the figure. It's just that sometimes when you're really pushing the foreshortening and you're getting all experimental and creative with the pose, the proportions can start to suffer. And that's sort of what we're seeing here. It's a combination of the proportions and also the functional aspects of the pose as well. Because you can see here, you know, particularly with the leg, that just based upon the direction that the upper leg is pointed in, the lower leg, and then the foot, you can see that there's some, it almost looks like there's some bending to the point of breaking that's going on within that leg, but the proportions aren't what they need to be either. So here's what we're going to do. Based upon the size of the head, I'm going to drop the opacity even more here. We can use the head as our marker, our proportional baseline, if you will. Let's say the head, without the hair, is roughly going to be about this big. All right. So I'm going to draw that in as a very simple shape, just so that it's clear to us exactly how large that head really is. All right. So from there, we can do a whole bunch of stuff. Once we've got the head down, we can go in and then we can start to build out not just the pose, but the construction of the base anatomy, as well as the proportions, of course. So what I like about anatomy is it helps not only with knowing where the muscles go, but also the functionality, so the movement of the body. It allows us to be able to create a pose that ideally doesn't look like it's broken. So here's what I'm going to do. We've got the neck. The neck's going to come down to where? Well, it's going to come down to about the center of the collarbone. And what I like to do, just in terms of making sure I know where the shoulders are connected, I like to draw out the actual collarbone there, and I'll draw it to where the shoulders would be. This is a great way to check whether or not your poses are actually working or if they're breaking the character. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to sort of do a combo here. We're going to create the base construction of the figure, but we're also going to lay in the anatomy as we go as well. So this is going to be the chest. Now, the problem here is that Giovanni has increased the size of the character's head. Why? Because the character is coming forward toward us, but it's scaled up just a little bit too big in relation to how the rest of the body is positioned and scaled. So it's a bit of a tricky thing to teach and to explain, because you really have to develop your eye for this. But the way that you develop your eye for it is by doing a lot of proportional studies. Okay, getting familiar with what those ratios are in terms of size and distance between each part of the body and how they relate with one another. So if I'm looking at this, because I've done those proportional exercises and I've practiced them, I can now make better judgment calls. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, all right, we'll be looking at a larger amount of the top of the chest, but here's the thing. While the head will scale up, the top of the chest is also going to scale up too. And I'm thinking, and I'm going to try to make sure that I stick with Giovanni's original pose as much as possible. We're just going to make it work. Now this arm is going back up here, so thinking about what's the angle of the top of the chest here. So we're going to say that this is the rib cage that we're working with, and we're going to take this center line down to around about here. I'm going to lay in the arch of the rib cage down there, but then I'm also going to create a cross contour that runs around the form just to give me an idea of the orientation of this actual object that we're working with, that we're using as a placeholder for the top of the body there. Once that's done, we need to think about, okay, where do we go from here as far as the midsection and the pelvis is concerned? How much of that are we going to see? What angle are we actually looking at the body on here? And based upon that, what will it mean for how much of the midsection and the pelvis that we're able to see? It's a matter of positioning and distance. So I'm going to say we'll have a little bit of the midsection visible there, but then we're also going to have the pelvis, and the pelvis is going to come up there and down here. All right, so if we turn this off now, I just want to make sure that this is coming together the way that we want. You can see that the head, it's large and it's been scaled up just like we want, but it's not too big anymore. It doesn't look like we have a bobble-headed character. Has anyone here played Nintendo 64 GoldenEye 007? I'm sure many of you have. There used to be this cheat mode called DK mode in 007 that would make all of their heads gigantic. So that's what I'm reminded of when I see a figure with a head too big. We've gone DK mode. I got to turn that off. Okay, so once that's done, we can start to attend to the limbs. And the limbs are probably the most out of proportioned part of the body in comparison to the torso. And here's the thing, on their own, the arms and the legs, they might look perfectly fine, they might be drawn beautifully, same with the torso, but unless they're sized up correctly in comparison to one another, well, what you get is a really well-drawn torso with really well-drawn tiny arms and legs. Okay? So, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to draw out the shoulder next. Notice that I'm connecting it to, they call this the clavicle, right? See, I'm not a professional at all. I don't even know the anatomy names, the official ones. I just call this the collarbone, right? So it's connecting there to the shoulder. And then what we're going to do is bring the upper arm toward us. Now, the reason that this arm is the way that it is probably because Giovanni here sort of ran out of room. He does this traditionally. So it's you can't just make a selection around the character and scooch it up so that it's higher in the composition. And so he's probably run out of room here at the bottom of the page and tried to really squeeze it in there. And that is going to be possible, so why don't we go ahead here and make it so that it looks a little less awkward. All right, so we're going to bring that elbow and that shoulder all the way up. And we'll even bring the hand forward as well. So that's the thing, is that you can really fit the human body into any small space that you've got dedicated to it if you're crafty enough with your foreshortening. Now I've just got to make sure that as I'm drawing in the arm here, that I'm scaling it up at the various points along its length to ensure that it's at the proportional measurement that it needs to be at for it to fit in with the rest of the body. So this will be the upper arm here. And then once more, we need to make sure the anatomy works, right? So we're going to run this shoulder down, and we're going to adjust the clavicle now. And what do the shoulders connect to? They connect to the pecs. So we need to run that shoulder down into where we believe the pecs would be, which is down there somewhere. So this is some pretty serious anatomy work that we're doing. We've taken this figure into surgery and we're rejigging things around here. And of course you can get in there and really start to separate those muscles after you've got everything down the way that and looking the way that you want. All right, we'll bring up the side of the rib cage. And then we'll attend to the forearm here. And then we draw on the hand. Now the hand, I'm just going to keep that messy because I don't want to be sitting here for the next half an hour drawing a hand and rejigging it until it's perfect. So I'm just going to say that, all right, it's a fist, just to show a little bit of intensity there. But I'd probably have it up a little bit more like that. And then it doesn't look so squashed in there. Like we've managed to do a little bit of a magic trick here. All right, we've deceived the viewer. We've made it look like we knew what we were doing. Okay, so what makes this work is the way in which we've sized up this forearm in comparison to the upper arm as it pulls back in space, in comparison to the shoulder, and then in comparison to the torso, of course, as well. Now the other thing that I might have done, well, actually no, the head's fine where it is. I mean, it's looking a little bit rigid. So what I might have done with the head is maybe had him trying to get away. So I might have even turned it toward the camera here. Now remember, we don't want to make the head look too large, but we do want to scale it up since it's going to be closest to the camera. This is just the basic rules of foreshortening, right? Now, do I get it right every time? Heck no. I've got to go back and do exactly what you're seeing me do here to my own work. And I've got to make sure that it's all ship shape and looking good. So we can give him a nice surprised look on his face. Now, I know that Giovanni has drawn a character that probably isn't that muscular. I've just gone in there and drawn in the muscles and really emphasized them just to hit on the anatomy and to give you a clear representation of that. All right, and then I'd probably take the head here and reposition it to there. Again, Giovanni can't just reposition things like I did there. So we've got to hand it to him for really giving a good shot with the traditional workflow. I also would have put a little bit more pizzazz into the hair, because hair can really just add so much character to a piece, so much drama. So if you can, always add a little bit more life to that. Maybe it's blowing a little. Again, add in the neck muscles, clavicle going up here. And then we've got this arm on the opposite side of the body being pulled back. Now, if Giovanni's got it right here, we're probably not going to see the upper arm at all. It's going to be pulled all the way back and obscured. But then we need to make sure that the pose that we've got going on for this forearm looks natural. And right now it's not quite there. So let's go ahead and redraw that. I'm going to flip the canvas here just to give myself a little bit of a different perspective as I'm working. I think if we can show his fingers spread a little bit, that'll show the tension in his hand a little bit more. Get the eraser out, do some rejigging here and there, and once again, you could tweak hands and mess around with them till the cows come home. So I'm not going to get too crazy trying to figure out how that hand needs to be, but something a little bit more like this, I would say, would work really well. But here's the thing, you'll notice how much I've foreshortened that hand to really pull it back in space. But I've probably done that a little bit too much. So we're going to reposition the hand so the forearm doesn't look too long. We'll bring it back to about there. And then what we'll do is we'll simply do some erasing. And you know what? Let me redraw that for just a minute. Now, redraw is sometimes just going to be necessary. It's something that most of us are reluctant to do, especially if we've already spent a ton of time on a piece. But here's the thing, your brain in the background, it's doing its little process, right? It's figuring out what it doesn't like about the art that you're creating. And if you do give it another chance, if you give yourself that extra shot to just rehash what you've done and maybe try to land a better outcome, well, what's going to happen is you'll probably end up with, well, indeed, a revision that you're much happier with. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the feedback session that it's really good to have a second pair of eyes on your work. I find that it's much easier for me to spot other people's problems than it is to spot my own. So if you can, certainly try to find someone, even if it's just another family member, to take a look at your art and just get them to give you a bit of an observation. Now, they might not be artists themselves, and so there's only so much value there that they're going to be able to give you, so much insight, obviously, but a little bit of insight is better than nothing. And if you haven't already jumped into the How to Draw Comics Facebook group, then I highly suggest you do that, because there's, well, at this point, I think there's like 70,000, 80,000 probably artists in there now. Got a lot of members. I haven't looked for a while how many people have joined that, but it's a lot. And that's a community of artists there that you can post your work to, and they're all going to do exactly what I just said. They're going to give you their take. They're going to give you that extra pair of eyes. And of course, if you want me to go over your work like I'm doing with Giovanni's here, just hit that link in the description below and sign up to the How to Draw Comics Academy. It's 100% worth it, I would say. I mean, to get the work that you're actually making, that you've got in production, to get feedback on it from a professional who's been doing this a little while now, who also knows how to break this stuff down and teach you what's working and what's not working. I mean, it's kind of invaluable, especially if you're somebody who is still learning this stuff, still on your artistic journey and trying to get to that pro level. Or if you just want to do the best work that you possibly can on your comic book project that you've been dreaming of doing probably for years now. So this is the top half of the character worked out. Next, we're going to attend to the legs, and this is probably where the most amount of shift is going to happen in terms of the quality, or rather just the accuracy of the anatomy and the perspective and the pose and the foreshortening that we've got going on here. Excuse me while I take a swig of coffee. All right. So how do we even position this guy's leg? Well, we can see that he's got the leg kind of there at this point. So he's tried to lift it up, and he's tried to position it in a way so that it's not, I think he's tried to give the character his own space down here. But what I'm going to say is we need to actually pull that leg back, potentially. Like, I'm trying to think about, in fact, we've got this arm coming forward, and as I was saying before, it is good to have opposing portions of the body coming backwards and forth. So why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead here? We'll sort of make it, look, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the positioning of the pelvis, in fact, now. Oh, hang on. It's a little bit of a puzzle sometimes. I'm going to go ahead and put the knee around about there. So the knee is coming quite forward here. And I could even pull that leg up behind the chest. It's because of the angle that we're looking at the character on here. And then, look, we can say, well, that leg is being pulled back in space at the bottom. So we might have his shoe here, right where the werewolf's foot is. We might even have it here. And then this other leg, we're going to say that that's been pulled back a little more behind this one. Does that work? I'm not sure. Let's flip the canvas just to see. So I'm guessing that the character's maybe fallen over here. So why don't we try to show that a little more? Why don't we actually have him falling? So these little decisions I'm making in my mind as I work here, you want to try to go through the same troubleshooting process with your own stuff. So I'm going to have it so that he's going to be falling toward the camera as he's running away from this werewolf. It's going to be even more dynamic, and it'll help the pose and the positioning of the character to just make that much more sense. All right, so we've got a little bit of a scribble there for the leg. Now I just got to figure out, all right, what's going to happen with this leg here? Maybe that. Could say that foot's coming there, tucked in like so. All right, beautiful. So let's go ahead here and make those adjustments. Now that we've got something scribbled in there, we can flesh it out a little bit more. Now the anatomy and our knowledge in anatomy is really going to help here. It helps to construct the pose, like I said, in a way that makes it so that the character isn't going to appear broken. Oops, let's undo that. Wasn't quite happy with it. It's worth keeping in mind that this leg is pulling away from us. So sometimes, just to help you get all the muscles placed correctly, adding a cross contour around the base building block that you've used to construct the figure can really help that. I'm going to go in there, add in the quads, the calf here, under the leg, maybe even an ankle we can see there, and then the foot's going to come in underneath that. And we'll just do like a Superman foot for now. That'll work. He's wearing shoes anyway, so that makes sense. Good stuff. So that leg's looking great, or at least better than it was before. You know, it's making more sense, it's positioning and whatnot. Notice how I'm adding a little bit more meat there. I like to think of drawing as sculpting, really. Just adding more clay where you need it and taking it away where you don't need it anymore. Reshaping, rejigging until it all works out just the way that you want. And then here, once again, I'll add my cross contour in. That's just this curved guideline that I've added in around the cylindrical form of the upper leg. I'm going to go in there and place in the first quad, second quad on the outer leg, and then we'll get this middle quad drawn in as well. Do a little bit of erasing. Remember that muscles are really there to just define the shape of the body, it's not like they're contour lines that you're just going to place in around the character willy-nilly. Their real function, their main role, is to give the character shape and to know how to shape the character. So we're going to say that that's the character's foot right there that we've got protruding out from that leg. Notice how it's a larger foot that we're looking at. And if the leg starts to look like it's too short, for example, it just means we haven't placed the muscles appropriately. So because this leg is pulling away from us, that means that this upper muscle needs to have more room. Okay, that's why it's important to have those guidelines in there, because they're going to help you to scale things correctly. All right, there we go. And yeah, this little portion here that we've got popping out from underneath the leg, that's the calf, but we may mistake that for the upper leg, which means we're going to add a line weight around the upper leg to separate it. Now we can switch that on and off. There's a bit more action there happening within the pose. He doesn't just look like he's in a freeze frame. Looks like we've got him either falling over himself, or maybe the werewolf has just pushed him or something. He's going flying, that's the thing. And the proportions in general are just working that little bit better there. Everything else is looking very, very nice, Giovanni. You've done a jolly good job on this one. You should be proud of yourself. I can't wait to see what you got cooking up for us next, my friend. Keep it up. Okay, let's just take a look at the comments real quick. I'll answer any questions that you guys have asked. We have Comics Legend. What's up, Comics Legend? Good to see you here, my friend. It says Clip Studio Paint is great for drawing hands. You can use a 3D model and pose the hand. You absolutely can, for sure. There's so many wonderful drawing aids these days that you can use, although the true power lies in being able to draw a hand at any time, anywhere that you want, without software, without an internet connection. You just got to drop a hand down on the page. Knowing that you have the ability to do that makes you an incredibly confident artist, put it that way. Look how worn out my Dragon Ball Z mug is. I need a new one. Okay. Hey, what's up, Psychic Flame? Good to see you here. Comics Legend also says, I can't recommend Clip Studio Paint enough. Yes, it's a wonderful application. The utilization of posing 3D models for reference is so helpful, and it also has 3D models just for hand poses, and you can pose them yourself. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, Clip Studio, for me, one of the reasons that it stands out as one of the best drawing applications for artists is just that it feels probably the closest to traditional drawing, and also looks the closest to traditional drawing. So yeah, all right, well, let's just jump straight back into it then, shall we, and keep this show moving. So that is Giovanni sorted. Once again, Giovanni, well done. Next, we're going to take a look at James. See James there in the chat, Acadian Comics. He was working on this in our last studio session, which of course you can catch in the live session that we had previous to this. And yeah, he was doing some really great work with the face, which was very difficult to pull off. He's Done a great job here with the body as well. So let's have a little chat about it, James. Let's talk about how we can spruce this up. Okay, there's a few things going on here. First up, I think we'll tackle the face. You've done a lot of work to the face since I last saw it, and it's definitely improved a ton. We're going to zoom right in here, and we're going to talk about how we can enhance the attractiveness of the face even further, and also just create maybe a better finish for this as well. So first up, this is really simple, right? It's the smallest things that can make the biggest difference. But what you're going to notice is that the bottom of this eye is actually sitting lower than the bottom of this eye on the opposite side of the face. So if we were to go ahead here and just take that eye and lift it up a tiny bit further, like so, already that's going to start to improve things. Might even pull it out some more. Okay? So that's the first thing to think about. And then we're going to discuss some general anatomy around the eye area. All right? So let's talk about eyes for a moment. What makes an eye, or what does an eye look like from the bottom-up view? Well, it looks a little bit like this. What you're going to find is that there is a larger arch at the top of the eye than there is at the bottom. So you're going to end up with something like this. Okay, and of course you'd have the pupil, the iris there, and a little bit of a shadow. Okay, and beyond that, you could start to add in the anatomy and whatnot, and the eyelashes. But why does the eye look like that from this angle? Well, I'm sure you all already know this, but it's because the eye is a ball. And the eyelids, they wrap around that ball. Okay, so if we were to, for example, draw the eye looking down, what is that going to mean? Well, it means that we're going to see a greater dip, a greater inverted arch in the bottom eyelid. We might even see the upper eyelid invert its arch too. So we might have something like this, wrapping around that eyeball. Okay. So that's how the eye is going to look from the top-down angle. Now, what I've done is I've stylized that bend, that arch that we see, contouring, or serving as the contour for the eyelids. And James has done the same thing. It's just that we've got to neaten things up a little bit more. Okay, so, and you know, the eyes have proportions too. So when we're looking at the iris in comparison to the rest of the eye, we need to make that a little bigger here, actually. So let's go ahead and make those adjustments. The first thing we're going to talk about is the tear duct. And then we're going to take the pencil up from there, the line, up and around. And then we're going to land it around about here. Then we're going to lead it back to the tear duct. And you can see that James pretty much did that, right? We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Although on the opposite side, you'll notice it's definitely much more of just a curved arch. Well, what we want to do is we want that same sort of stylization, that rigidness that we had going on previously for the opposite eye. And we want to apply it to this one. Now there will be a little bit of a change in the shape just because this is the opposite eye that we're working on now. All right, so what happens when we're looking at the eye from the bottom up position is that we're also going to get a better look at the eyelashes. So just like the upper lip is going to expand because we're seeing more of it, the eyelashes are also going to have more height to them because we're looking up at the eye now. So if there's ever a time to show off the top set of eyelashes, it's going to be in this bottom up position where the camera is placed low. All right, and what does it mean for the lower eyelashes? Well, the lower eyelashes already don't have as much expansion to them, even when we're looking at it from an eye level, but they're going to shrink a little more. So we end up with something like this. You can see that even though James had a decent amount of eyelash happening on the lower side, outer edges of the eye, we didn't have the height at the top, so we want to put that in there, and that's going to help to create the illusion that we want to go for here, or the look, I guess, that we need to have for the eyes when we're looking at them from this angle. Now these eyelashes are going to clump together. That's important for stylization purposes. And then, as I said, what we want to do is we're going to add in that pupil, right? But then for the iris, we're going to go ahead here and we're going to increase its size. We're going to make it bigger. To about that scale, I'd say. And you can see that makes a huge difference already. And now what we can do is we can take this line, this contour, which is going to come out, by the way, from the eyelashes. If the eyelashes weren't there, of course, we would just get this fold up above the eye as an additional contour. Now this is where the crease happens between the upper eyelid and the eye socket. And then we can draw in the eyebrow. Now we need to make sure that the eyebrows are sitting at an equal, at least in this particular expression, the eyebrows are sitting at an equal distance from the top of the eye on either side of the face. So we're going to jump over to this side. We're going to add in that eyebrow. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And then we'll complete the eyebrow shape. On either side. Okay, there we go. Now let's talk about the nose. All right. Now for a female character, we don't want to define the nose too much. We're going to keep it pretty simple. We'll have the base of the nose defined, like so. We'll draw in a nostril on this side. And a nostril on that side. And that's about as complicated as we're going to make it. From there we're going to draw in the mouth, and it looks like James has gone for a very Michael Turner look, which is obviously the right look, considering this is Witchblade, right? And Michael Turner did draw Witchblade, so add this little dip here in the lips at the top, and we're just going to add a tiny bit more shape to those lips. We're going to be more descriptive with that shape. Now the other thing you'll notice with Michael Turner and the way that he draws Witchblade's lips is he doesn't have a whole lot of detail drawn into those lips at all. He leaves most of it to the colorist. What he will do though is he will define the shape of the lip. So something like that. He might draw in a reflection onto the lip, but then he'll leave it. Okay, now we're ready to attend to the shape of the face. Okay, the outer edges of the face. Here's how we're going to tackle that. With this side of the face, it's not going to tuck in underneath the eye like you've got it, just because we're basically looking at the front of the face here. If it was turned more away from us, then maybe we would see that sort of form happen, but not so much from this particular angle. Now you'll notice her cheekbone on this side is quite high, whereas down here on the opposite side it's quite low. We want to lift it on this side. Like if you're going to draw the cheekbones in there, which is going to age her, it's going to make her look like much more of a mature woman, I'd tell you to lift them up just a bit on that side. Now I'm going to go down, and here's the tricky thing with drawing a head from this angle. We've got to try to find where the base of the jaw is going to be and how it's going to look. So over here, let's say we've got the head, right? And it's looking at us at an eye level view. It's not tilted up away from us. All right, this is our eye looking at it. So you can see here that, well, if we're looking at the head from the direct front like this, we notice that the chin here is sitting lower than the corner of the jaw. The corner of the jaw is sitting higher. And that's why we see more of an angle there. But if that head begins to tilt back, so let's do an example of that, and we're effectively looking at the bottom of the head, or at least a lower portion of the head. Okay, let's say it's angled up in this direction. Okay, what do you notice now? Well, if our eye line is continuing in this direction, what you'll notice is that the chin is actually sitting higher than the corner of the jaw now. Okay, so that's really what's happening. So what we have to figure out is, well, how much is the head tilting back? Now, if you look at her face, it's actually not, it's not that foreshortened, right? Like, if it was tilted back that far where the chin was higher than the corners of the jaw, which is what you're trying to say here, we would see a lot more foreshortening on the face. But actually, the face is quite long. There's not a whole lot of foreshortening there at all. In fact, I would say that it's, if I was to do a little diagram here of how far back I think that lovely lady's head is angled from us, I would say it'd be maybe this, right? So we're still, you'll notice, we're still actually going to be seeing the chin sit lower than the corners of the jaw there. All right, so if we say that the chin is here, and sure, the chin might actually be sitting a little lower, simply because, why? Well, it's closer to the camera, right? But I think the corner of the jaw is still going to be sitting higher. I think really what we're going to end up with is something like this. Okay. Now, the neck is quite long, so what we're going to do is we're just going to maneuver, well, you know what, I'm just going to draw the neck straight in here. But let me really tone this back in terms of the opacity. Excuse me. So what's going to happen now is that we're going to draw in the neck. I'm going to have it run down to about there. Okay, and even that is quite long. So that'd be the trapezius on that side. And as for the neck of a lady character, of course, you want to keep it nice and subtle as far as the anatomy is concerned, the details. Okay, and there we have it. Just going to shape that jaw a little more. Okay. So with that said, we're now going to increase the size of the head so that it fits the rest of the body a little bit more appropriately. I'm thinking, let me zoom out here so I can see the full body. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe about there. All right, so we've also scaled up the head quite significantly there. Once that's done, we're going to attend to the rest of the anatomy. Excuse me, sorry about that. My throat's a little bit dry today. So we've got a few anatomy issues here. You'll notice that the shoulder, it's, well, it's sort of, you know, we're losing our way a little bit, I would say. So this is the top of the shoulder by the look of it. We still need to show the form of the shoulder there. So I'm going to bring it up. And I know that you did use a reference for this one, James, but still, we want to use our anatomy knowledge to enhance really what we're seeing within a photo reference, especially if we're losing some of the definition of the anatomy. And I'm also thinking that I'm going to get rid of some of that anatomy in the neck. I'm going to take the shoulder there as well and bring it up. Wonderful. So we've got the shoulders sorted, and then we need to connect those to the pecs, right? And obviously we're dealing with a lady here, but ladies still have pecs. So we're going to bring that down. And of course, the deltoids, the shoulders, they are quite squashed just because of the pose that we've got her in. You'll notice that her breast here is actually positioned in a way where it doesn't look like it's stretching up. So we need to stretch out the breast since her arms are being lifted there. Again, I'm sure you were observing the reference, and you could probably pull that reference up and be like, well, Clayton, actually, you got it wrong. But I'm just going by physics here and what I know, and how we can create the appearance that we're going after here. All right, I'm not entirely happy with how this shoulder is looking, to be honest with you, so we're going to do some adjusting. Here's how I sort of connect these sections onto the shoulders, by the way. We might go for something a little bit more like this. Breaking the anatomy up like that, almost like a jigsaw puzzle, it helps with the symmetry. Okay, there we go. I'll increase the size of that deltoid. Come over here and do the same thing. There we go. Now, it is good to always be thinking in terms of 3D. So I'm going to add in some cross contours around those deltoids, just to show that they actually do have form to them. Once that's done, we'll draw in the ribs. Now, of course, we can enhance like the size of the breasts if we want to. So no matter how large you make them, they still need to, rather than looking like they're at rest, they need to look like they're being stretched as the arms are being pulled up. Okay, there we go. And then I would, of course, add this section in. I'm going to move a little quicker here. And now that we've got this shoulder section worked out, we can go in there and actually draw in the forearms and the upper arm more accurately. Like we know where we're sitting. So we'll get that upper arm drawn in, and of course, we're going to have... I'm not going to do her whole body here, by the way, just for time's sake, and because I'm losing my voice a little bit for some reason. I must still be recovering from a cold. We've been constantly getting colds here. That's what happens when you have kids. Apparently, they just, you know, you're sick every single week. All right, so on this side, same kind of deal. We're going to bring that upper arm down and in, and then we're going to have the bicep, and this little muscle that comes up, it's like the underarm muscle, the armpit muscle, that comes up and into that area of the upper arm. Okay. Once that's done, we can draw in the latissimus dorsi, okay, the lat. It's called the latissimus dorsi because, well, it's a lateral muscle. It stretches across the body. And then we're going to have the ribs here. Now, once again, I think that when you're working from reference, it's good to sort of mix your understanding that you've already got of anatomy with the reference that you're looking at. So still construct that reference that you're observing with the anatomy knowledge that you have. Sort of aligning the two. Trying to figure out, well, where does the ribs line up on this reference? And then this is going to run in here. Okay, so this is the obliques that I'm placing in, the sides of her body. That's going to run down into her hip area. And then down to her legs. All right. Let me go ahead and just readjust where we've got her belly button there. Obviously we've got the abs, which will be placed in, but obviously we're working with a female character here, and even a superhero, a female superhero, is probably not going to necessarily have her abs defined, unless it's like She-Hulk. So yeah, you know, I can tell in this thigh area, okay, where the groin is, I can tell that certainly you're observing a reference. And this is the thing, you know, why you can tell in comic book illustration when an artist has used a reference. It sometimes doesn't quite have the same life to it that, you know, somebody like, for example, Joe Mad, right? Or Mark Silvestri or Michael Turner doesn't have that same level of energy to it. And it's because real life doesn't have anywhere near the amount of energy that an actual comic book is going to have. So here in this section, where we have got the groin, what we want to do is add just a little bit more shape to it. All right. So obviously we would have her thigh there. Just going to shape that some more. Make it sure that the appeal is there. Okay, and then of course we would have the thigh on this leg. It would come down and around. Now you don't have to make the leg look as muscular as I've got it there. But you can see how we've got some shape to it now. By the way, I'd probably make just this section of the leg much wider. So something like that. All right. And that's really mostly what I'm going to do there for you, James. Obviously, we could totally go in there and give her some nice hair. Make it all flowy and whatnot. Something that you certainly want to do when it comes to Witchblade. All right, you could really go crazy with the hair actually. But hopefully there's some points there that you can take away from it, with you rather. Take away from me, with you. And the main ones are really going to be just in relation to the eyes, but especially to the angle that you're looking at the head on and how that affects the positioning of the chin in comparison to the corners of the jaw. It took me a long time to get my head around it as well. I was like, well, what the heck? How do I get this right? How do I get it right consistently, more importantly? It can be tough. It can be real tough. It can feel like a lot of guesswork actually, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. As long as you keep in mind what I just showed you there, it should start to make a lot more sense to you. Alrighty, let's jump over into the comments here. All right, oh, cool. We've got Rex in the chat. What's up, Rex? Another long-time member of the How to Draw Comics Academy. Can't wait to go over your work. Yep, still trying to kill it with feedback sessions as usual. I hope that everything that you're working on, the projects that you're currently underway with, are looking great. I'm sure that they are. Alrighty. Yeah. You know what? And you did make something really nice, James. Don't worry. You did great. Okay, I can promise you that. You're making constant progress. And if everybody could see just how far you've come since joining the Academy, they would be just blown away that you're actually pulling something like this off now. Forgot to unmute my mic. Glad to have you here, Yenzo. Thanks for popping in. Always a pleasure, my friend. We've got Rays Lano. Hey, what's up, my friend? Good to see you here. Glad you were able to make it. Yeah, for sure. You know, it's the little things, James. And hopefully what I've said here will actually stick with you, especially like looking at the head from that bottom-up angle and figuring out how to calculate whether or not you're going to be looking at a situation where the chin is sitting above the corners of the jaw or the opposite. It's you know, it's kind of fun to try and figure that stuff out, but at the same time it can be a little stressful. It can make you scratch your head a little bit. And then we have 15 seconds off frames. Hey, what's up? Says the Fioren meme was indeed relatable. at one point, to be honest. Totally. Okay. Awesome stuff. Let's move on here. Next, we are going to be taking a look at, we've got, let's see, I think we've got Jason, and then we've got Dominic, and that's it for now. So let's take a look at Jason's work. So Jason is a new member to the How to Draw Comics Academy. Oh, maybe a few months now he's been there. Beautiful stuff here. Wow. I mean, can you just imagine the level of thinking that Jason had to put in to getting the perspective right on this guy? I mean, wow. But you can see he's taken the time to break it down on a fundamental level, and no doubt that helped in a really big way. I mean, this is just a wonderful exercise. You know, draw a transformer using basic shapes and put it in perspective, give it a cool pose. Like, you can see how having a solid foundation is really going to be absolutely invaluable to you throughout the rest of the process. It's the greater predictor, the greatest determiner of success for a drawing, I think, is just having a solid foundation. If you can get that down, then everything else becomes smooth sailing. You don't really have to think about, okay, do I have the right pose and the right proportions and the right position? No. Once that's done, it's done, and you can focus on the more fun aspects of the drawing, such as the design and the style that you want to draw the character in. So overall, really great work here, Jason. I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot that I can critique on this one, just because you've executed it so beautifully. I mean, you could, like I said, you could easily make this a drawing exercise just in general to really scratch up on your drawing abilities in perspective when it comes to perspective. But let me take a look here. There's a few things that I could just nitpick if you really want me to. I better give you something, right? That's the thing. Whenever somebody like does an actual good drawing, I feel like I'm letting them down if I don't give them a critique, at least something. But let's take a look here. So there's just some consistency issues with the character design itself that I'm spotting right now. And it really concerns the shoulders of the character. So you can see here, we've got this section of the shoulder. Sits at that size. You've got this little detail in the middle there. So that's all looking great. Except when we get to the other side, we can see that panel that you've got for the shoulder is expanded. It's much bigger. Okay, now the design is still consistent in terms of the elements that it consists of, you know, this inset that you place in the top of it, but the scaling is off. Okay, this shoulder area looks larger than it does on the side that's closer to us. And really, if you're going to have a larger one, it should be the one that's closer to us. So that's obviously something that you've missed. I know that you know how to draw really, really, really well, and that it's not a drawing issue as such. It's more just paying attention, making sure that you are remaining consistent with the design decisions, not just in the way that the character looks with the design, but also the scaling of the elements within that design on either side of the body, so that you can make sure that symmetrically it stacks up. Okay, so there's that critique. In terms of the pose, it's a really good pose. All right, and for the most part, you know, this leg section, it's pretty good. You know, you've got the orientation of it down. I'd say just looking at the width of this element here. So this is mainly where the critiques are going to lie for you today, is just, so we can see here that probably we could have extended this section a little more. Over here. Okay, just because there is that narrowness there. You might say, well, Clayton, yeah. In fact, that's going to get narrower, so it's going to look longer even, just because of the angle that we're looking at it on now. It's going to be foreshortened in the perspective. Okay, so there's that section there. And just also keeping in mind that when we're looking at, say, the character's leg from the front view here, for the most part, that we're looking at like a front 3/4 representation of it. And then we look at the size of the panel. Okay, now there's going to be some perspective applied to that panel, which means if we're looking at that panel directly from the side, it might look a little bit more like this. All right, we turn it to look at it from the front, then it's going to start to narrow out. All right, so what does that mean? Well, it means that we're looking at more of a side view representation of the leg from this angle in this position, which means we're actually going to want to extend it back a little further here. And maybe I'm pushing it a little bit too far there. Obviously you want to make it look good, but and then we'd have this back section, for example. Oh, sorry, that's supposed to be sitting higher. So it'd come up like that. All right, so it's just paying attention to mostly the sizing of different parts of this character's body as they're pushed back in perspective or pulled forward. Okay. Now, when you're dealing with a really complex design, like what you've decided to go with for the leg, that can be really tricky to try to determine. There's not exact mathematics that you can use, especially in a dynamic pose such as this. You really just have to use your eye. And for the most part, you've done a really good job throughout the rest of the character. So these are just little parts that I've pulled out that could obviously do some work that you might have missed. But other than that, it's really just a matter of broadening your awareness to consider these things that I'm talking about and to try to miss them less. Right? Like I know that you already understand what it is you're doing. So it's not a, like I said at the beginning, it's not a drawing issue per se. It's more of a calculating issue. Just being aware enough to be able to take all of that information in and make all of those considerations as you're drawing, which is really tough to do for any artist. You're going to miss some things, unfortunately. But overall, this character has a great pose, really solid construction, and I think that you've done a jolly good job. Like, I'd give this easily an 8 to 9 out of 10. So, awesome work on this. The only other thing that I'd suggest is if I increase the opacity here. The only other thing I'd suggest is going in there, if you really wanted to polish it up, just add in some line weights. You know, all the lines are sort of the same thickness the whole way around, but especially on the underside contours of each of these components, if you go in there and you just thicken that line up a little bit, you'll add a really nice professional quality to the finished presentation of the drawing. Line weights are really great for that. Just helps things pop a little bit more. So if we see this stack of forms around the torso area, we just add in those line weights to the base of the forms. You can see that we get that extra lift, that separation between the forms. So something else to consider, but otherwise, really awesome work, my friend. You've done great here. Okay, next up, we've got Dominic. So Dominic posted this actually a little while back and wanted some critique on it. He wanted a critique on a decent amount of things concerning this character, actually. So let me just jump back through here and refresh my memory. He says that he'd appreciate feedback on the facial features and hair, line weight, shadows, and the form of the manipulated snake body. Pose is a bit stiff, but I'll stick with it this time. Okay, he says there's going to be a second or even a third snake lady. Hello. That's pretty cool. I look forward to that. Well, let's take a look here. I think overall you've done a fantastic job on her body, Dominic. That's beautiful. You haven't overdone it. Got some really nice feminine shape there. It's great. All right. So yeah, the pose is a little bit stiff here, Dominic, but that's okay. You know, in terms of just the execution of the general proportions, the body there, and its construction and its look, I think that she's looking absolutely lovely. But yeah, I'll show you how to add some more energy to that pose in a bit, but let me give you feedback on what you actually wanted feedback on, which was her face. So I'm going to drop the opacity here. And, well, just looking at this, what's the first thing we feel? What's the first thing we notice? We notice that the upper portion of her head looks much larger than the lower portion. And it shouldn't look that way. Even though Dominic is intentionally trying to draw it that way to give the illusion that the camera is sitting higher above, looking down on her head, or that her head is angled down away from us, it's not quite appearing that way, is it? So this is a struggle for a lot of artists, actually making something look like it's shifting angle as it's rotating in space. Especially something as complex as the head, can be very tough. So let's talk about why it's not quite looking right and how we can fix it. Okay, so he's ticking all the boxes, but something's amiss. Okay, so what do we do? Well, I'm going to go ahead And let's see here. I'll start out with the eyes. I'm just going to redraw those in and feel my way around. Feel my way around this. I'm going to drop the opacity a lot here, just so that I'm not accidentally just retracking over what he's already done. So we're sort of flattening out the top of the eye, and he's done that very well. But then what we're going to do is we're going to take the eye and we're going to lift it back up into the tear duct. So we're dropping it, and that's one thing that Dominic hasn't quite done. All right, so the tear duct actually needs to sit higher than the base of the eye. Remember, it's wrapping around that ball. Okay, once that's done, what we're going to do is this. We're going to lay in the eyebrows. Now you're going to notice that in this particular view, they're sitting quite close to the top of the eye. And the reason for that? Well, because we're seeing much less of that underside ridge of the brow. It's obscured. There is a protrusion that the eyebrow creates. Creates like a roof above the eye. And that roof, from a higher angle, is actually going to come down against the eye and sometimes even obscure it. And I think Dominic knows this already because he's kind of done it. Okay. There we go. Now the other thing that we might do is just push the angle on the eyebrow a little bit more here. And we'll lower the inner section of the eyebrow that runs in towards the middle of the nose. Okay, and I'm constantly looking at this, I'm judging it, I'm like, does it look right? Now, another major thing here that's making this head kind of almost look like we're looking at the front of it, but down on top of it at the same time, is the nose. The nose needs to drop down further. Okay, so we're going to take the nose and we're going to place it here. And then we're going to pull the nostril up to about there. It's important that it looks as though the base of the nose is dropping down. And if we're looking at a high enough angle of the face, that nose might drop past the mouth, right? Speaking of the mouth, we need to also make it look like we're looking down at the mouth. So here's a little exercise, right? When we're looking at the nose from the standard point of view, it's going to look a little bit like this. All right. And when we're looking at it from above, it's going to look like this. Okay. Notice how now it's dipping down. And when we're looking at it from below, well, all of a sudden, that nose bridge is going to shorten, and we're going to see much more of the underside base of the nose. These are very fast diagrams I'm doing, so don't judge them too harshly. All right, cool. So that's what we're keeping in mind for the nose. Now for the mouth, here's the thing. What we're noticing with Dominic's mouth is that it's kind of just a 3/4 angle mouth that you'd expect to see if you were looking at it at an eye level view. Okay, so it looks kind of like that. But what we want is we want to give the effect like we're looking down at this mouth. That's what we're trying to capture. So what ends up happening when we're looking up at the mouth or down at the mouth? Well, we're going to get either a downward arch if we're looking down at the mouth for the opening, or we're going to get an upward arch. And in fact, we can even start with that. So if we're looking down at the mouth and define the opening like this, and guess what? We're going to see less of the upper lip in this downward view. And we're going to see more of the lower lip. Okay. So again, if I redraw that out, we're going to see sort of a downward dip for the opening of the mouth. That will appear like that. And then a little bit more of the lower lip. Now I don't like to complete the contour line for the opening of the mouth that I draw at least, but it's sort of what we end up with, okay? And of course, we're looking up at the mouth, then it's the opposite. We're going to see a lot more of the upper lip, and we're going to see less of the lower lip. Like so. So if we apply what we've just gone over there to Dominic's lovely lady here, we're actually going to apply that dip to her mouth. Like so. And already it looks like we're looking down at the mouth now. I'll add a little bit of a shine to her lips too. Okay, so we'd end up with something like this. Now this nose, remember that it's going to come quite close to the mouth because we're looking down at the head now. That's probably about as close as it'll get here from this angle. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to lay in the outside shape of the face. Before I do that though, just let me place in the pupil and the iris. Now if the character is looking at us, that means they're looking up at us because we're looking down at them, which means the pupil is going to be closer to the top of the eyelid, and so will the iris. Which means we'll get something that looks like that. Now the thing is that you don't want this iris to take up too much of the eye. In other words, you don't want it to be hitting the bottom eyelid because she's looking up at us, right? That means that that iris is going to get closer to the top of the eye. Okay, great. So now that that's done, what does it mean for the chin? Where's the... Excuse me, I'm just going to grab a glass of water because I'm about to lose my voice. So I'll be right back. Just give me a moment. All right, I'm back. So, excuse the interruption. All right, so let's zoom in now. I like to work from a distance usually, so I won't get too far out there. So what does it mean for the chin if we're looking at the head from this point of view? Well, the chin is going to sit closer. It's actually going to sit closer to the bottom of the mouth, because it's the furthest away, right? So all the proportions of the face, they're actually scaling away from us as we get further away from our point of view, right? But then they scale up as it gets closer to our point of view, and the closest point of the head to us is the top of it. Which means by the time we get to the bottom of the face and we're looking down at the chin, well, it's the distance between it and the bottom of the mouth has substantially decreased. So let me do an example. I'm going to do a really basic example here, okay? So let's say that we've got, well, let's represent the head as a cube. Right? If we've got the human head here, and it's facing us, well, let's put it in a 3/4 position actually. All right. So let's say we have the head and we're looking at it from pretty much an eye-level view. And we've got the proportions placed throughout. Okay, so we're going to have the brow line, the eye line, we're going to have the nose, the mouth. Okay. And look at this, we can even draw in some eyes here. And a mouth. There we go. So this is the basic proportions of the head, by the way. This actually stacks up quite well, believe it or not. But if we're looking down at the head, here's what happens. We're going to see the top of it, obviously. A lot more of the top of it. It's important to understand what's actually happening so that when you're left to your own devices, you can think through the process and understand why things look the way that they look. This is going to be an extreme example. But we might end up with something like this. Now, because you'll notice, by the way, how much smaller the base of the head is now in comparison to the top. But where's the midway point going to be? Which is where the eyes sit, by the way. Well, it's going to sit, they're going to sit much lower. It's going to be around about there. Okay, so now the eyes are here. And the nose is going to sit there, mouth is going to sit here. There you have it. That's what's happening. Basic perspective, essentially. So, chin's going to get smaller and it's going to get closer to the mouth. Then what's going to happen is we're going to find that the corners of the jaw actually sit a little higher, which Dominic has done quite well, in fact. And we'll do the same thing on this side of the face. There we go. Now I'm just going to flip the canvas here to make sure things are looking as they need to look. We may need to take in the face a little bit more on that side. Now this is a tricky angle. You know, I think pretty much everybody watching right now, and myself, we're going to have trouble with this angle. It's a dynamic angle. Heads are already complicated enough without, you know, mixing things up with the camera angles, but it's certainly possible to pull off. Now we might even tuck that chin up even more, closer to the mouth. All right, we'll turn off the underlying sketch. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And now you can see it does feel like we're looking down at the face here. Just that little bit more. All right. So now here's where things get tricky, is how do we tackle the top of the head so that it doesn't look like we're essentially drawing a giant light bulb? Well, here's how. Let me show you. So Dominic's right. We are going to have the ears sit a little higher. He's got the positioning of that pretty much spot on, in fact. So let's quickly draw those in. By the way, the anatomy of the ear, it's also going to have its own foreshortening occur. So just keep that in mind for those of you who don't quite know how to draw an ear yet, off by heart. In fact, that earlobe, I just messed up myself. Wasn't quite drawn at the right angle. So take a look at this box. That's sort of what you're dealing with the head. Because if you look at the skull, it's somewhat elongated at the top, right? You know, you have the temporal area of the skull. So there's that. And if you were looking at the head directly from above, it kind of looks like this. You got the front of the head, and then the back of the head as the skull protrudes. The back of the head is going to sit wider. Okay, so we're actually wider at the back of our heads than we are at the front. All right. So we're sort of dealing with a box, is what I'm trying to tell you. Which means, if we can think about it in that way, what we're going to do is we're going to take this lovely lady's head and we're simply going to give it a little tiny bit of a corner there. As we pull it back. Now that's what I'm thinking about as I'm working here. All right, so if I was to get the hairline in there now. Let me flip the canvas one more time. Adjusting the forehead there. Wasn't quite working where we had it. And this is probably where a lot of the sculpting actually occurs. Let me turn off Dominic's because it's confusing me a bit. All right. If I go in there and, as I said, I'll get this hairline placed down. We might end up with something like this. And we're pulling back the head. This is now the back of the head that we're laying in. This is where things get a little messy. Okay. So Dominic, this is where you'll need to develop your eye a bit. It's mostly due to this slight expansion that we see at the back of the head. So if it looks weird at all, simply means we need to get the eraser out and make some adjustments. Okay, that's looking better. Now we're looking at this face, and it's important to understand that we're actually seeing quite a lot of the front of it. So while it is a 3/4 angle, we need to consider the fact that, well, actually it's mostly a front view 3/4 angle. Now I've raised that up a little too high, so you can see how subtle it is. Now most of this would be covered with hair, this top area of the head, and we can go ahead and do that in just a moment, just to show you what a difference it can make. But I feel like it's important that you understand what's going on underneath it first. And so this changes where we place her ponytail quite significantly. So it's probably going to be around about here, I would say. There we go. And now we draw out the rest of her body. We're going to have the trapezius muscle, runs down from behind the neck. Got the shoulders there, the clavicle. And probably we're going to bring that shoulder on this side in some more. And then we'll go ahead and complete the shoulder on that side. So as I was saying before, you know what? I'm gonna take this side of the face down just a smidge. Okay. So it's not perfect, but it definitely looks like we're looking down on her head a tiny bit more now. I'm going to drop the hairline even further down. And from there, we can move into the hair, which is another area that Dominic wanted help in. So let's talk about the hair for a minute. All right. What I like to do for hair, I'm going to show you a really simple technique here, Dominic. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay in a few contour lines that are combed in the direction that I want to essentially pull the hair in. And obviously, because the hair is tied up at the top, we're going to be pulling it from whatever point on the head that we're drawing it from up towards this area at the top. Like so. Kind of reminds me of like a garlic. All right. So we've got a few primary contours there. For hair these days, I like to keep it really simple. You can make hair as complicated as you want, but it's good to keep it simple, especially at the start. Okay, so here's how we're going to pretty much wrap this up for the hair. All right. So we've got these guidelines, you could think of them as, but we're going to build onto them. And it's really simple. We're just splitting it at the top, then splitting it at the bottom. Going to do the same thing here. And we can also, of course, add in another split if we want. Now the thing is the more you split it up, the more complicated it's going to start to get, the more busy it'll appear. So just be aware of that. less is more sometimes. Now this is a technique you might see used by J. Scott Campbell within his art. So a lot of artists who have a cleaner style will tend to draw hair this way, and it works really well. And hair takes a while to actually draw, so it's good to try and get the hang of it and then just start laying it in once you know the direction that the hair is headed in. And voila, that's hair right there. Now toward the bottom of the hairline, you will want to add a little bit more detail just to create like a distinct separation from the face into the hair. That just means you're adding more lines, okay? And there you have it. That's hair pretty much taken care of. Beautiful. So let's move on to, I see that Kick and Flavor is asking about torsos. So let's take a look at Dominic's torso for the snake lady that he drew up. We'll just increase the opacity there for a moment. Yeah, this torso is looking pretty darn good, I have to say. Let's talk about, though, how we would spruce up this pose. I think that the snake body, by the way, is looking absolutely fantastic, Dominic. Really great job there. I think that it's personally good to go. You know, I would probably just make the belly of the snake around this section dip a little tiny bit lower. Let me do that on this layer. Okay, so I might take it down a notch to around about there. There we go. But you know what I'm going to do, rather than going over the top of yours, because there's not actually anything technically wrong with what you've got there. We just want to spruce up the pose, right? So I'm going to create like another pose over here next to this one, just to show what your other options might be. And it really comes down to starting out super loose when it comes to establishing a pose for a character like this. Or any character for that matter. So, Kick and Flavor, if you want to know about torsos, we're about to just knock one out. But, alright, so the head position's looking great. Let's zoom in here a little bit. Don't want to zoom in too far, especially during this initial stage. Don't have to be drawing anything fancy when it comes to establishing a pose, by the way, at least in terms of decoration. All we want is proportions and the positioning of the body. That's it. All right, so she's snake-like, right? So let's go ahead and actually have her body coming forward a little. Okay, so we'll have her neck there, and then we'll have her torso coming back, like so. Now, the thing with female torsos is they're actually quite a lot narrower than male torsos, so women have a smaller rib cage. That's why the shoulder width is usually not as large. Men just have a lot of upper body action going on because of all the rocks that they pushed around as cavemen, all that tree chopping. Okay, so the ladies, really their width comes within in their hips for obvious reasons, right? Like bearing children. That's just the way that the physical body has evolved. It's kind of cool, really, when you think about it. Just how the body evolves based on like the utility of human beings and what we are needed most for. Like it's based upon what we do. Okay, so you can see that the torso is being pushed back here, and I'm going to have it so that she's coming back, and then her snake body is going to come forward like so. And then I'll have it twisting around like that. That's what I'm going to do. That's going to look great. So we pull her body back like this, and then it's going to lead into her hips. Now, even though she's got a snake body, we still want to get that hip anatomy accurate as much as we possibly can. All right. There we go. And then we're going to have her shoulders. They're going to come up like so. And I'm thinking we'll have her arms out like this, kind of spread. Can still have her weapon, of course. It'll come up like that. So I've got these directional action lines happening for the pose, you'll notice. Okay, so now we'll draw out her snake body, and check this out. We can really start to get those cross contours in there to describe the shape that we want to go with for it, how thick it's going to be. All right, pull it down and around. Like so. And I probably could have made it a little bit thicker, honestly, because by the time we get it to the top here, it's going to be quite thin. And then, of course, the breasts. There we go. And then the arms. And you'll notice that I'm just, even though I've got the positioning of the arms pretty much down, I'm going in there and I'm adding some basic anatomy, just to give me a better place to start. And you'll notice that this arm over here is going to be pretty foreshortened. And I'll give her some scary looking claws. All right, there we go. Cool. And then what I'd do is I'd take her ponytail here, and I'd also try to make that as dynamic as possible too. So we'd have that coming down and around like so. See that energy? See how it's all about energy. If you can get that in from the very start, I mean, you can create a truly alive looking image. Like, you can see that I haven't done anything fancy here technically. Like, in terms of a drawing, this is scribble, right? But look at the amount of energy that's been injected into it in comparison to this beautifully polished, gorgeous looking execution over here by Dominic. right? Like we just got to like merge these together now and we'll have the perfect illustration. So this is an important lesson for everybody to learn. Make sure that that you combine that you inject the soul into your drawing, okay? So you could think of this as like the soul that we want to put into and possess this beautiful polished drawing over here with. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Alrighty, we're going to wrap it up there. Okay. That is a wrap for today's feedback session. Session 111. We've done quite a few now. And it's no surprise, the Academy has been going for a while. Now you might be sitting there wondering, Clayton, how do you select the work that you critique? How do I get my work critiqued? Well, what I'm actually critiquing is the work of the members of the How to Draw Comics Academy. There's a link in the description below. I highly suggest you click on it and check it out if you'd like your own work critiqued, because that's kind of what we do here in the How to Draw Comics Academy. I mean, it's not just about feedback. Obviously, there's a massive library of lessons there that you can check out, all organized and carefully curated, start to finish, beginning with the foundations all the way through anatomy, and then the more advanced stuff, like sequential storytelling and style. But I think probably the greatest gift that the How to Draw Comics Academy gives to its members is these feedback sessions, as well as the studio sessions that plenty of you have seen here being broadcast across the How to Draw Comics Academy network. Because the wonderful thing about the combination of the feedback sessions and the studio sessions is that, well, the studio sessions give us that opportunity, that time throughout the week, no matter how busy we are, no matter what else we've got going on. Those studio sessions allow us to schedule in a little slice, that 2 hours every single week, where we can catch up. And you feel that accountability, right? Like you don't want to miss it. We catch up with our fellow Academy classmates, do some drawing, put into practice some of what we've been learning. And then the feedback sessions come around, and regardless of whether or not we're putting into action what we learned from that week's lesson, or if we're working on a particular project that we might need help on, maybe a commission, maybe just something that we've had bumping around inside our head that we wanted to get down onto the page. We finally got it down, but it didn't look quite right. Those feedback sessions really do help in enabling us to just see where those areas of improvement are based on where you're at, right? So it's really cool to just have someone look over the work that you're doing and show you what steps you can take next in order to take it to that next level. So again, link is in the description. Definitely jump into the How to Draw Comics Academy. Join us there. You saw what you can get just in this feedback session alone. Basically, I dedicate a mini lesson to each and every member's work that I go over. So you can expect the same when you sign up to the How to Draw Comics Academy and become a part of what we've got going on there. I would suggest it especially for anybody who is just starting out on their journey or looking to level up their work to take it to that professional level. The Academy is really built for you. It's perfect. I designed the Academy specifically for you if indeed you're in that particular place right now in your artistic journey. Because before the Academy, what I was doing is I was just doing, packaging up lessons, right? Like I'd do a course here. Many of you have probably come to know my proportions course that I did back in the day. And these were great. They had a lot of value in them. But what they were missing is that feedback, that interaction, that tight-knit community. Like, I think that one of the things that makes it a challenge when it comes to trying to learn this stuff is that oftentimes we feel like we're on our own, like there's no one really to turn to, and it can feel like on a bit of a solo mission. But with something like the Academy, I got to tell you that it's really a special place because we've gotten to know everybody. We got James there in the chat. We got Rex. So many of even the people that you see in that chat are actually from the Academy. And me as a teacher, it's because I used to teach at university, and it feels a lot like that now. Like I'm coming into a classroom full of students that I've actually become familiar with, that I've gotten to know. I know the way that they work. I know what they want to achieve. And so that also helps a lot in giving them what they need to succeed. But I hope that you got a ton of value out of today's feedback session either way, and that you'll take some of those tips and tricks and apply them to your own work and ideally see the results from doing so. I'm going to go through the chat real quick here just to answer any questions that might have come up along the way. Okay, so Toodle says, are these courses ideal for a hobbyist like me who only has access to traditional medium? May I ask what fundamentals are going to be covered for the Academy? So, well, let me just get it up. I can show you right now. Keep in mind, by the way, that there's lessons being added to the Academy all the time, new lessons, because we do them kind of live. It's a live classroom experience. And then we record those lessons, we edit them up, and then we add them into the Academy Learning Program. So let me show you what we've already got. Like, we've been doing this for a little while now. I'll see if I can get it up anyway. This looks like the one that we want. Okay, there we go. So this is actually a little community news feed, but if you go to the Academy Learning Program, if you're looking for fundamentals, my internet connection is quite slow today, so you'll have to forgive me. But this is just the fundamentals tab right here. Okay, so you can see we've got quite a few that we cover. Starting with the very basics, like as simple as just line alone, right? So a lot of this can obviously be applied whether you're working traditionally or digitally, or in whatever really whatever medium you want to work in. You're still going to be using line, you're still going to be using shape, you're still going to need to know your proportions, and you're still going to need design skills in order to make a good looking character. When it comes to sequential storytelling, you can apply that to obviously just paper and pencil or digitally. We got figure drawing. There's a ton of stuff on that. We've got anatomy. We go through anatomy. And as I said, we're building up this library. We're adding more stuff to it all the time. We've got full-blown character design workshops. We've got some environment lessons in there. And we also have, and this is my favorite part, is sequential storytelling. Okay, there's not a lot of courses out there that actually dive as deep into sequential storytelling as we do in the Academy. That's something I'm really proud of, and I hope to actually build out this section of the Academy Learning Program as well. But like I said, the lessons are really just a small part of the Academy, because the idea is that once you've gone through those lessons and you've applied them, you put them into action, and that's why the live classes are really something that I wanted to do, because you can be there as I'm teaching you and you can be actually putting these steps into action during the class, like being in a real classroom. And you do that, you take a look at it, you post it up for feedback, and then you get the feedback on it. So it's like this full circle feedback loop, because that's really what I think is required in order to make real progress. Like, there's no point in watching a lesson that you may or may not do, because there's not really any accountable. When you're just watching a lesson that's been pre-recorded, there's not the same amount of accountability there as if you're actually in it live. Obviously, we've got the full library there if you do miss it, but being there for the live, you feel compelled to put it into action. Plus, you can ask questions, which is really great. Then you get the feedback on it, and it's just those two components, I think, are so important for actually getting to where you want to go with your art. And that's why we include the feedback sessions there. We've also got the community, obviously, which is really fantastic. You see other people posting up their artwork and encourages you to get going with yours. It's very encouraging to see the progress of other students. It kind of lets you know that, hey, it's possible, that you're not just doing all of this for nothing, that it's a real thing, that if you continue to practice and apply the feedback that you're being given, that whatever vision you've got for your art in the long term, there's a good possibility that you're actually going to get there. And I think that the Academy is really the place to do it if that's what your mission is. And welcome for those of you tuning in for the first time. Really awesome to have you here. It's an absolute honor to have you join us. Yeah, for sure. Definitely jump in, check it out. What else have we got going on here in the chat? Thank you so much, Beastway. I'm glad that, Beastway. Sorry, I mispronounced that, didn't I? Welcome, glad to have you here. Yeah, definitely love doing the drawing studies. I think it's really fun to break this stuff down and to make sure that I explain it in a way where you're not just copying what I'm doing, but you're actually understanding it. You get the reason behind what it is I'm doing, and that's when it really starts to click. Okay, well, that is pretty much it. Cheesysaurus Rex. Yeah, the live streams are kind of coming back. So initially, we were actually doing all the feedback sessions and all the studio sessions within the Academy. Excuse me, I'm going to lose my voice any second now. Initially, we were doing those in the Academy, but I thought it would be really cool to actually promote the work of some of the students that we've got in the Academy, and to allow them to kind of jump onto some of the streams with me and to sort of talk about the projects that they were working on, and to also at the same time provide value to the wonderful community, that broader community that has become howtodrawcomics.net and the How to Draw Comics Academy, and to help you guys out there as well. So it's a great way to promote the Academy, to let you know it actually exists in the first place. Because I'm not very good, honestly, at marketing and promoting, so I forget about it, and I don't realize that we've got an entire audience there that probably doesn't even know the Academy exists. So there's that as well. But I just think that one of my big goals for the How to Draw Comics Academy long term is to sort of do like an end of year exhibition for our Academy students, and to invite some of the actual comic book creators that I know who are looking to hire talent, inviting them to take a look through that exhibition gallery and to sort of, who knows, maybe poach some of that talent and bring them on board for actual paid projects. That's just a little fantasy that I have, a little vision that I've got for the Academy long term that I'd really like to evolve it toward. But we'll see what happens. I do think, though, more than anything else, helping to get the Academy students out there, helping to get eyes on their work, is another additional facet of success that hopefully I can bring to them within the capacity that I have, within the network and the audience that I've got to offer for them. And who knows, whatever I can do to help them out beyond just teaching them these skills, I'm absolutely down for. And I think that it's really valuable for those of you watching on YouTube or Facebook or wherever this is being broadcast to. It's really inspiring for you to see these students working at their skills, practicing, and trying to push themselves even further. And hopefully week after week, you'll be able to see the progress that they're actually making too. Whether you decide to join the academy as well or not, it's just really encouraging to see that because it lets you know that, once again, this is possible. And that if you just take action on it, you really can draw the way that you've always dreamed of being able to draw, and maybe make that comic book as well that I know that you want to make. All right. Well, that's it from me for now. Until next time, keep on drawing, keep on creating, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.